There's this media trope I call who's behind the curtain. It's basically when a media production shows viewers that the premise of the show now hinges on a surprise appearance. Maybe it's a celebrity. Maybe it's a popular music artist. It's basically the variety show format, as we see new reveals of various popular figures proceed. How fun. It's a traditional reveal structure where the suspense is cleverly hidden and worded into scripts and aesthetics. Who's up next? The question begs your attention. The format is much older, but when it became a media production format in the early 1930s, it became something very common, and still informs contemporary postmodern late-night variety shows. I call it postmodern because the construction of the content is the content. The forming of the cast of people on board becomes itself the feat of the production. No longer is it attempting to be modern art. It is a product that fully acknowledges itself as superior product. The same thing as before, but this time better. Why is it better? Because there's more. More of the content you know shoved into one production. Now, let's imagine that, but turned into the world of fictional entertainment. This is, and has almost always been, superhero media. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a thing. Big budget superhero movies have been largely the main staple of motion picture production and distribution since the early 2000s, and after 20 years, things from this format are starting to show their quote-unquote wear and tear. And many are noticing it, and commenting on it. So what exactly does this mean? Is the genre of production finally collapsing? Are we seeing a financially recognizable return to original Hollywood productions? Has Hollywood been riding too high on the returns of bigger and bigger comic book themed action films, and now is perhaps facing a huge economic crash? You'll just have to wait for the reveal to find out. Oh, I got you good anyway. Oh god, comic books are so weird. Illustrative print media inspired such crazy ideas, like, for instance, the modern-day superhero. But what is the superhero? It's just like some person with fantastic abilities like stopping time or regenerative healing, flight, super strength, I suppose. Some people think that truly good superheroes aim to represent the quote-unquote best values of humanity. I think superheroes, especially the really dominant franchise characters, more accurately represent roles within society that help create the monopoly of force that regulates said society. The monopoly of force is basically a government, and the laws that a group of people elected or chosen to operate said monopoly of force must adhere to or change. It's the social structure that maintains an army, police, and other forms of territorial and property-based defenses. The Justice League represents a council of various hegemonic forces, like Superman being the spirit of the good doer immigrant, or Batman being the spirit of vengeful capitalism. Once all these forces align, they create a supposedly global peacekeeping force, tasked with the bettering of the world, specifically on their terms. Except the Justice League aren't elected, neither are the Avengers. It's why narratives of superheroes clashing with various national governments or rogue government agencies are always taking place. Superheroes still aim to redeem the excellence of the individual who can, apparently, overstep the supposedly corrupt government. An individual who knows better and has the ability to make it better, regardless of the governing authority and laws of the land. Because sometimes the law is wrong, sometimes the government is indeed the bad guy. It's the same fantasy narrative of many Western stories that focus on a rogue mercenary or wanderer being the only way to stop the gang that holds the proverbial small town hostage. The sheriff and mayor were helpless, or perhaps just paid off. You needed the man with no name to stop the bad guys. You needed the Batman. The superhero does what the government and law and order can't. That's the allure of the superhero, and it comes in many shapes and forms. Many feature films, toys, video games, posters, t-shirts, hats, watches, pants, skateboards, fridge magnets, coffee makers, reclining chairs, Halloween costumes, smartphone cases, notebook covers, hoodies, sweaters, beer can cozies, tank tops, dresses, masks, headphones, paper clips. Okay, so there's a lot of superhero content out there. It's reached a cultural fever pitch. So why are people suddenly turning against it? Why are there consequences for riding so high on superheroes? Don't they supply us with this great fantasy that we can all cling to? It's like investing into only one thing for a long time. There's only so long it can successfully reach the masses with consistent growth. The exponential growth that Hollywood craves over and over again, quarter by fiscal quarter, is simply not sustainable, but at one point it always seems like it can be. While the early 2000s were seen as the birth of the modern, big-budget Hollywood superhero movie, with films like Blade, Spider-Man, and Batman Begins, we can go further back to features like Tim Burton's Batman or earlier to Superman to see the initial boom propelling into the cultural zeitgeist. However, even after mediocre attempts like Catwoman and Daredevil, the superhero films saw a huge coming into itself with both Iron Man and The Dark Knight from 2008. Both of these huge release films shot the interest in the genre to the mainstream public consciousness, and the era of the unironic appreciation for all things nerdy, pulp, science fiction, and fantasy steamrolled the late 2000s and all of the 2010s. Suddenly, it seemed like more present than ever before was the desire to attend Comic-Con, to purchase merchandise, and to read comics, and so on and so forth. The mainstreaming of superhero media and merchandise was great for business, crafting ideal consumers who collect everything, study all released content, and discuss said media as part of their identity. But of course, now we're reaching the end of the 2010s, and nothing great lasts forever. Avengers Endgame would release, gathering seemingly all of the attention of the world, selling incredibly well, and making audiences weep and cheer. It was a time many deemed to be the end of the superhero genre craze, and a transference to a more cynical time, the 2020s. Now, I don't know about you guys, but the 2020s have been, it's happening. At time of recording, it's still happening. Much of the dominant Western culture had been moving towards a more cynical attitude long before the 2020s, but the pandemic did shake things heavily more in that direction. Postmodernism has been happening before the 2020s too, obviously, but lately it's been ever prevalent. Much of the hype around any comic book film these days is simply speculation of which characters from the source material will make a surprise cameo, and of course as well, which celebrity will inevitably play them. It's strange that many superheroes barely get films with just them and one of their villains squaring off anymore. Even in origin story format films, there just has to be a cameo, a reference to other media, something quote-unquote more than just the initial product itself. No longer is a simple object or story element special if it isn't setting something else up to happen in future media. Significance is locked to multiple media projects. One film is no longer enough to build any sense of narrative significance. Much of the intrigue for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was not about the character arc Strange will endure, or what commentary the film will share about society. It was about if Jim from The Office was going to play Reed Richards. Spider-Man, once known as the working-class hero who is always put in the toughest of situations all on his own, is constantly being assisted by other characters in his Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Iron Man has to build Spidey a new suit, to save the day with. The guy who butchered Boba Fett, Jon Favreau, or his character Happy, is gonna fly him in a private jet in his time of need. Also, again, new suit. Definitely not an excuse to sell more toys. It's a new suit. It really matters for the story. Trust me, it totally does. Doctor Strange and the previous Hollywood Spider-Man actors helped Spider-Man from breaking space-time. And yes, you guessed it, wow, a new suit. That's just crazy. It's wow. Characters from the first film become important later in subsequent films. The setup and payoff formula done almost effortlessly, and on repeat, after repeat, after repeat. It's about as postmodern as it gets, always consumed about being consumed, trying to set up the next product before the first one was even finished. Seeking new audiences, but with the same properties, ever changing while retaining its supposed core market appeal. Even at time of recording, looking at current production comics, they ever continue to become attempted launch pads for future generations of consumers. Yet they still find the need to retain themselves in terms of economic growth and popularity by returning to that core brand eventually. The death of Superman has always led to a return of Superman. Heck, they killed the New 52 canon Superman off just to return to the previous canon Superman. Can't have Wonder Woman wear a new costume for too long. The original will always inevitably come back to continue the production recycling. What's new is new, and then what's old is new again. It's that postmodernism existing again, bubbling atop the fresh batch of contemporary production.
Never ends. Also, what's my superhero name?
Your name is Shazam.
Of course.
Alright, so it might look a bit bleak. Superhero media is just multi-million-dollar productions that boil down to that trope, who's behind the curtain, and nothing more. And people understand that, thus the cynicism. But is that really all it is? Superhero movies, while they have been facing sharper and sharper criticism over the years, are not necessarily all vapid products. Many a time, they are tools for cultural expression, sometimes with pretty interesting subtext, like in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where the theme of learning that there is fascism still churning at the core of Western imperialism was expressed quite well. And it still had a lot of fun, cool sequences that the mass audience can enjoy. Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. Yes, I am unironically giving credit where credit is due here, despite my better judgment.
Martha! Why did you say that name?
Our commentary on the effects that 9/11 had on America, in relation as well to how it affected the story and perception of the quote-unquote alien immigrant. Of course, they are also, as I said earlier, products of the culture industry, made really to sell toys and merchandise, and to continue a relentless cycle of production. That element about them is inescapable. No wonder Hollywood still gravitates towards the idea, being much more profitable than simple one-off action films. Franchises are where the real surplus value is. Even media that attempts to address this cynicism, like Amazon's The Boys, is nothing short of ultimately replicating many of the same tropes and selling points that superhero media thrives on in the market. So, are we, proverbially stuck? Has the market cornered us viewers into cinematic universes, multiverses, into the quote-unquote final format of big-budget storytelling? For the foreseeable future, many big-budget Hollywood productions are set in this direction, even as cynicism and apathy towards the concept grows seemingly larger. Riding high on this format has led to a huge postmodern malaise, one that holds back the real quality modern statements and ideas we should be engaging with in cinema. That's why this addiction to superhero movies is so tragic, because it's a consequence of the system it exists within, a system that should be better. That system should reward creativity, but instead rewards the opposite, low risk, ultimately subpar pieces of art. And I actually love comics. I grew up with them. They helped encourage me to take up illustration and writing. They encouraged me to stand up for myself and think outside the box. I love the movies, and I still enjoy many of them.
Wait! I love you guys. Thank you.
I fall prey to the appeal of the cameo fest, the who's behind the curtain trope, all of it. And maybe that's just it. We know it's all about selling toys and advertising the next product. Yet we still go. We still consume. And they still produce. Maybe the style of Hollywood action film will eventually lose its luster. Who knows? Sooner rather than later. But until then, we're stuck on superheroes.
We're gonna be okay. You can rest now.
There ain't no rest for the